I suppose you all wonder why I've called you here today.
Well, we've got our 2023 Ring of Honor inductee,
great.
Ernie McCray, with us. We'll start with just some questions for Ernie here.
So overall, how does it feel to be inducted into the Ring of Honor a couple years later?
Oh, it's a great honor. Thanks to that man right there who advocated for me. Growing up in Tucson, I was a Arizona sports fan. I saw Roger Johnson and Link Richmond and Leo Johnson and Kimbrys and all those guys play. So to come up here and play, I just wanted to get a degree. That's all I was thinking about, to feed my family, and then got to be pretty good in the sport, and then to be honored later on. I wish I'd known this was going to happen. I guess it's good that we live our lives and don't know what's. I thought when I did all that stuff that it was over, and then here I am, 84 years old, at a press conference. My mother would just get a kick out of that.
Do you have any memorabilia from your scoring game?
I lost the ball that I scored 46 points, and so no.
And let you keep the jersey or anything like that?
Nah. And I don't know. That's not part of my kind of wanting to remember things, memorabilia. I got enough kind of junk in my house.
What is your fondest memory of your time here?
Graduating. I let me say something about myself. I started working when I was 5 years old. We weren't like impoverished to where we're about to be on the streets, but I had always worked hard to help my mother out. Matter of fact, when we bought our first house, when I was about 12 years old, I loaned her the money for the down payment. And I did a lot of janitor work when I was growing up, which I hated. I was janitor work at Sears and different places, and I just wanted a degree. That's what I came here for. And I knew what I wanted to do. I was a teacher and principal for most of my career. And I knew I wanted to teach after my first day of kindergarten, because I was all excited about going to school. And then after that first day, I went, what the hell was that? It was just no fun at all. Sit down, be quiet, folding your hands and all that kind of stuff. And some of my friends got labeled as bad kids the first day. I was kind of labeled as a smart kid, and which gets you a lot of things in a school setting. But I went all through school kind of analyzing lessons. You're sitting there. My schooling was pretty much read chapter 8 and answer the questions at the end of the chapter, and I would think, especially in social studies, I would say, we could act out, we could be Benjamin Franklin, we could do that. So that's, when I taught, my classroom was like a theater. We just, sometimes I'd have lesson plans and we'd do this and that, and then the kids take that and run with it, and then I'm following them. They're doing it, just active learning, and they didn't have to sit down and be quiet. You couldn't make disturbances, but how do you learn if you can't talk and exchange? So I found my niche. I'm not a bragging kind of person, but I could teach my ass off. Kids, at open house, people say, last year I couldn't get this sucker to get up and go to school. This year I can't get him to eat before he goes to school. They wanted to come to school. And it helps if you're out there, you're teaching 6th grade and you're out on the playground and shooting some baskets with kids, and one of them misses. This is my first week of teaching, and I just instinctively grabbed the ball and stuffed it. I don't think those kids have exhaled yet. It was just like, whoa. The next day, it was all over the campus. There's a teacher at Perry Elementary who can dunk a basketball. And then I would go out to PE and hit the softball over the bungalows, I called it wowing, those wow moments. And after my first year, I didn't really know I knew I had done a good job, but I didn't really know, how well. But at the 6th grade promotion, they'd introduce the different teachers in their classes. There's Mrs. Dominguez, room 8, and so on. And I'm sitting there, and they said, Ernie McCray and his 6th graders in room B5. The auditorium erupted. People stood up. It was like when I scored 46 points, in the gym. And I'd be just sitting there going, I guess I did a pretty good job, and I liked being a kid, and so I liked working with kids, and I've managed in all of my 84 years to be around kids. Kids are my favorite people by far. I'm going on and on.
Are you surprised that no one has scored more than the 46?
Yeah, kind of. And I really didn't mind if somebody, but I played on lousy teams, and the program's developed. You don't really need anybody to score 46 points. That doesn't stop you from scoring 46 points, though. But and I really didn't mind if somebody broke it. But I like that because of doing that, I get mentioned with Sean Elliott and Chase Buddington and all that. I mean, that's really, if I hadn't done that, I'd be forgotten.
What's amazed you about the progression of the program from when you played here to where it is today?
I don't have words for it. Today's athletes are just absolutely amazing. I mean, everybody on the court can dunk, and do alley-oops and stuff. It's just, I'm amazed at today's athletes. Like, take baseball. I remember at one time, in Major League Baseball, if you didn't hit the ball all the way out of the park, Willie Mays, Roberto Clemente, and Hank Aaron, those guys go get it. Now every Major League Baseball player out in that field, if you don't hit it out of the park, they will go get that thing. And track, what was that? I can't think of it. Having a senior moment, can't think of Usain Bolt, stuff like that. It just, especially see somebody that tall with those kind of, aerodynamics just coming out of a thing, and I don't even know how to play the way they play today. I see kids walking down the street in my neighborhood, 6th graders doing all the, between their legs and all that stuff. In my day, if you got your hand under the ball anyway, and then that ball came down, if these guys went, if this game somehow resorted back to, say, 1950, the score would be about 4-3. If we had those old refs, it'd be steps and all that stuff. But I liked today's game, except for the threes. I can't wrap my mind around a guy running right underneath the board, the goal, and he could just score here, and he's whipping it out to this guy for a 3. I'm for get all those tools that you can get, and I see kids out shooting threes, trying to be Steph Curry, but they haven't paid attention to Steph's other part of his game. Steph not only shoots threes, he can shoot in the paint and do all kind of stuff. You can knock him down in the air, and he'll end up throwing the ball up in the thing, So I'm just blown away by today's athletes.
Did you have a chance to go to the NBA at all?
Yeah, I was drafted by Cincinnati, tried out, in Columbus. I graduated the same year as Oscar, so I played with him for a while. I didn't make the team, but it was a good experience going back there and being on the court with Oscar. I remember with Big O, he came in the camp late because he had been in the Olympics, and when he came in the camp, I remember one time we were scrimmaging, and I kind of blew the play, so I said, I just better clear out of here, go over to the other side. And I was running under the goal, and the next thing I know, I had a basketball in my hand, from Oscar. Last time I saw him, he was looking off some other place, and I had a ball, an easy basket and stuff. And I had never experienced that kind of greatness before. When you were out there on the court with Oscar, you knew that here was a guy out there that was way better than you, I was used to playing against good athletes, but that was an experience. And when they talk about the GOAT. And I'm not into all that stuff, but you got to mention his name. And that.
You mentioned at the beginning you were thankful, and if not for him, I wouldn't be here. Who's him, and describe that?
Greg Hansen.
Describe that, how Greg Hansen, obviously continues to pump you up.
If I remember right, I think you got in contact with me and asked if, I can't remember what you asked, if I'd like to be in it or something, I said, oh yeah, nothing else to do, that kind of. And then Greg went back and talked to somebody. Next thing I know, I'm hearing from David Hickey. How you pronounce his last name? Hickey, yeah. And I'm in.
What's it mean for you over the years to remain relevant, especially with Greg Hansen's columns? He's good at focusing on a lot of the local people that maybe others forget about. And what's it mean for you over the years that, here and there you'll pop into his columns and such? And obviously that probably played a part as well.
I love it because I like being remembered in my hometown. I wrote a kind of poem type thing that I'm going to do later. I love Tucson, and I love this campus. I grew up on this campus. My mother. Let me say something about my mother. My mother was a big city girl. She grew up in Pittsburgh, went to college at Howard University in Washington, D.C., then got TB and had to move out to the desert. And she said when she got out here, she went, what the hell, where am I? We're talking 1930s. How did I end up in this place? But then the university was about 10 blocks from our house. And she brought me up here when I was a kid to forums, to games, to the Sunday evening forum. Any of you remember that? The Sunday evening forum? That was a forum for world shakers and stuff. I met Eleanor Roosevelt as a kid, and we'd go to dance recitals and to games. My mother was a sports nut, so when I enrolled at the college, I didn't need that tour and all that kind of stuff or whatever they give you. The only reason I'm not living here now is because I live in San Diego and there's an ocean there. A lot of my old friends said, why don't you retire here? I said, man, I live by the Pacific Ocean. I don't know if that means anything to you. It just gives you an element. I don't get in the water much anymore. I used to do a lot of body surfing, but I just like knowing that it's there, and sometimes just take a walk on the beach. But I get over here pretty often, and I contribute to things in town.
What's your Bear Down Gym?
Go ahead.
Have you walked through Bear Down Gym?
No, not the new. I was in there maybe 10 years ago or so, and they had a lot of offices, as I remembered. So I don't know what it looks like now. But I tell you what I did go to yesterday that warms my heart is the African American Museum, right there in the Student Union. And got to hang out with Bob Elliott a little bit, and I'm in part of the exhibit in there. So I'm proud that way. So you got to remember, when I was growing up, Tucson was Jim Crow. And so when I see something like that, I see the growth, and the university was kind of like, it wasn't all that up with it, when I remember coming up here, because I can remember discussions like debating professors and stuff, and they didn't kind of like that, but I grew up in a home where we talked. I mean, if I didn't talk, my mother would have just run all over me, so we talked. I didn't get whippings and all that, but my punishment was if I did something, I had to explain to my mother. She said, I got all day, you just take your time, but I just want to know why you and your friends would go up there to Mrs. Warner's house, and that woman loves you to death, and just strip her tree of all those peaches. I just want to hear what that was all about, what was on your mind. And then I explained. She said, that's what I thought. You were just being stupid and stuff. I was very respected in my house. I was listened to. I didn't have to leave the room when grown-ups came unless, they really did have something that I didn't need to hear. But so I had a kind of a different, like I said, I loaned my mother the money for our house, and she paid me back in interest. She said, you need to know about loans and all that kind of stuff. So.
As an educator, how were you able to really relate some of those experiences growing up during those quote-unquote racist times in our country, and particularly in Tucson, and how you were able to serve as a role model to people of color as an educator?
My first class at Perry Elementary, I asked the kids to talk about who they were and all that, and I talked about who I was, and I told them about what I had just gone through. I had just finished college, and I told them about what it was like growing up in Tucson, and they were leaning forward from the first day. They hadn't heard that. They knew about Martin Luther King and all that, and that there was racism, but they hadn't heard it from somebody. And then we just started off. That kicked off our year. I was lucky I started teaching in San Diego in 1962, and it was during the Vietnam War, and I taught in a naval housing area. Most of the kids' dads were off to Vietnam. And then my second year there, Kennedy was assassinated. And whatever level I was as an educator that day, at the end of the day, it was up to here. Because right before recess, we heard that the president had been shot. And I remember saying, oh, yeah, right. Somebody would shoot the president. And then when we came back, turned the radio on in the classroom, and the first words we heard was, John Fitzgerald Kennedy has been dead. And my kids just went, and I was going, oh, my God. And then they start raising their hands. Well, Mr. McCray, how could somebody get by? And it dawned on me, we're experiencing something together. I wasn't the expert in the room on this. And that's when I really learned how to talk to kids. And the poetry I got out of kids and the prose that year was just, they could have been in a Pulitzer Prize category. And we would write poems and do reel-to-reel tapes and send them off to their dads, that type of thing. Learning to me is like you pull out all the stops. I remember a professor at the university, he gave us an assignment, and in that assignment, and I don't remember what it was, but I happened to learn about apartheid in South Africa. I didn't know much about that, and I was just, mesmerized by that. And coming back to the class, I talked to. I lost my point. Having one of these. What did I just say?
Talking about being a role model and using your experiences growing up, during those unfortunate times in our country, and reflecting that upon your students. You mentioned apartheid.
Yeah, with the prof. And I was asking him about apartheid and stuff, and he said something about, well, that's not relevant to what we're talking about. And I remember I hadn't become an educator yet, but I just thought anything is relevant in a learning environment. So, but I learned from that. I didn't consider that as he's a poor professor or something, but I just learned from that. I just thought this isn't going to be the way I teach. Tell somebody that isn't relevant when they've gotten some relevance out of it.
During your time playing, and I apologize everybody, so many questions. During your time playing, do you recall any times that you were able to play somewhere in the South? And during that era, was there more particularly a harsh experience for you as an African American when you played in the South? And if so, how were you able to reflect that experience to your students as well when you're talking to them about being a role model in history?
Well, we played a lot of Texas team, Hardin, Simmons, and all those, and it was okay. I didn't hear nigger or anything like that with them, but you could feel a certain thing. But let me tell you, I don't know. I must have lost my mind because I had traveled through the South with my mother. We traveled every summer, and I kind of knew, the deal. But there was a party, I think it might have been at Canyon, Texas, in the gym, and I was invited, and everything was cool. I said, hey, okay, you know, they don't mind me being black and stuff. And I was talking to a group of people, and I don't know, I was talking to this girl, I don't know how she got in our thing, and asked her to dance, and it was like, you know, what is that TV commercial where everybody gets quiet? You know, and that's what it was like, and I remember going, uh-oh. I started feeling like my neck, you know, I got the hell out of there, you know. I almost walked from Canyon, Texas to Tucson. I wanted to get out. But it wasn't that. I remember we were refused eating service at a restaurant one time, and my teammates said, well, if he can't eat, we won't eat and stuff. And Fred Inc. was hungry, and he said he wanted to eat, you know. That's a whole other story, Fred Inc.
That particular eating incident, was that in Texas as well?
Yeah. And I remember getting in a room and one of our games in Texas and turning the water on in the bathroom, and it was golden, you know, that kind of thing. Just kind of. But I traveled actually in the South. My mother and I, we would travel. So I've sat in the back of the bus, drank from the colored-only water fountain and stuff. And one thing I appreciated about Tucson was it wasn't that level, and you could curse somebody out. You know, I could curse a white dude out, and if it says, well, screw you, you know. Like South, you're pretty much saying you want to die, you know. And that was part of my mother's education for me. We traveled to maybe about 40 of the states. She would visit old college roommates and things, and since then I've been to all 50. So, and both of my parents were musicians. My dad, that was the only thing he ever did for a living. He just eked out a living. He and my mother broke up early on. I don't ever remember them being together, and I don't know how they got together, because my mother was type A, and he was type whatever. He was the most chill, the most laid-back human being I have ever met. I don't ever remember him mad. I never heard a curse word from him. He never scolded me. He was in some kind of flow, and he didn't support us. And people said, my mother, well, you can take him to court. And she said, I'm not taking him to court, because with him not doing his part, I don't have to deal with him at all, you know. So I don't know, I had a unique upbringing. I was respected in my neighborhood. Adults liked me. A couple of my best friends were old women. Geneva Razanwich and Mrs. Warner, who lived, Mrs. Warner on the corner, you know. I don't know. I got a lot of love in this town, and there was a part of me that always wanted to prove. We were thought of as dumb. And I went to Paul Lawrence Dunbar Junior High, the all-black school, and the white citizens used to call it Dumb Bar. But they used to have a radio quiz show for schools in those days, and Shirley Robinson and I represent the 4th grade at Dunbar, and we would win that thing and stuff. So I got that out of my head early on. You know, somebody might think I'm dumb, but they're dumb for thinking that, you know. So I haven't, like I said, I just had a unique upbringing and was respected. So I've never felt like I can't express myself somewhere, because I was heard as a kid. If you're listened to at age 2, you know, who's going to, you know, you can say what you want to at age 32, you know.
Well, thank you, Ernie. We're almost a tip here, so thank you very much.
Wow. Thank you.